Welcome into the Saints Insider Podcast for Friday, December the 1st. I'm Zach Ewing with Rod Walker, Matthew Paris, and Jeff Duncan. I think we get Luke Johnson off of IR tomorrow, so he will be at the game on Sunday when the Saints play the Lions. Will you be at the Dome when the Saints play the Lions on Sunday? Are you bringing your paper bag, or are you just going to boo, or are you still on board with this team? I don't think that's many of you, judging by the comments on Wednesday's show, but we are going to preview that game and find out if any of us think the Saints can actually pull this thing off in a win that, I don't know if it would turn their season around, guys, but it would certainly make things feel a lot better on Airline Drive.
I think it could turn the season around a little bit. I mean, they haven't beaten a good team all year, so I think this is kind of a little bit of a gauge game to see if they can do that, because we haven't seen that yet. The two really good teams they played this year, the Jags, and I guess you'd say the Vikings to some degree, I don't think they ever even led in either of those games. They were in catch-up mode the whole time, and I think this game has that same potential.
I might would throw Houston in there. I think Houston's pretty good.
Yep,
yeah, actually, that might be the second best. The fact that we're counting the 6-6 Vikings with Josh Dobbs at quarterback as like one of their tough games just goes to show you how easy the schedule has been. But this is not an easy game, man.
No, it's not at all. I mean, the Lions are coming off a loss, but I was looking it up. They're still, by DVOA standards, which is like a metric that measures efficiency, they're 6th in offense, 10th in defense. Their defense hasn't been as strong lately, but this is a really well-coached team. Dan Campbell's done a hell of a job there, and they have a lot of weapons. They just have like a lot of talent. Their draft class has been really strong, and so like if you look at them versus the Saints, the Lions are very much a team on the rise. They've been building for a couple of years, where it seems like the Saints maybe are now kind of on the decline here.
Saints Insider Podcast is sponsored by Bank Plus. Their banking decisions are made here in New Orleans by local bankers who know the community and take the time to know you. From small business to big business, home loans to bank anywhere technology, Bank Plus is here for New Orleans. Learn more at bankplus.net. Okay, so we'll start our preview of the game. It's at noon on Sunday. It's on Fox. And the betting line at Caesar Sportsbook is Lions -4. That, I believe, was 3 last week. It got as high as like 4.5, 5, and it's kind of settled in at 4. Over-under is 47. That's the highest over-under for the Saints this year. So expect it to be a higher-scoring game, Rod. I think that tracks with what we're thinking here. Is like both of these offenses. Now, the Saints question, and we'll get to that later, like can they actually score touchdowns? But both offenses should at least be able to move the ball up and down the field for the most part.
Yeah, I would think so, especially the Lions. I think what they do really well is run the ball. And, I mean, if you watched the game last week, you know, that's something that the Saints really struggle with stopping. So I think the Lions will be able to move the ball. And if the Saints, we're going to get to that, but if the Saints can score in the red zone, yeah, they could score some points. But that's the big if and the big unknown about this team.
Yeah, just don't think you can trust it at this point. We will have predictions at the end, so we'll see if any of us have the gumption to actually take the Saints here. But on the other side, guys, for the Saints, Chris Olave, concussion, but he has practiced. The last time we recorded this, we just sort of assumed he was going to miss because most guys miss with a concussion the next week. They at least miss 1 week, and Olave had a concussion last year. He had one in college. I mean, it just didn't seem very likely, but he's at practice. So, I mean, there's a chance, Matt.
Yeah, it's interesting. Like, if you look at it last year when he suffered a concussion, he was a DNP Wednesday, limited Thursday, full on Friday, but then he still didn't play. So now, even though he returned to practice a day earlier this year, this year it's limited. If he's full today, maybe he goes, but I could also see them taking a cautious approach. We were talking a little bit before the show, and Jeff, you were a little bit more optimistic. I think I'm a little more iffy on whether he actually plays or not, but that's just because of the way the concussion protocol works.
Yeah, somebody told me, and I've not reported this for obvious reasons, but I heard in the game when the concussion protocol, like the specialist went over to him, asked him who the president of the United States was, one of the questions, and he hesitated. And that could just be, in the moment. I mean,
what's that old guy's name? Yeah,
yeah, exactly. I can see that. But once you do that, that sends up the red flag. And so I think people with the Saints felt like he wasn't maybe concussed, but he didn't respond to the protocols. And so I don't know how that factors in. It's a complicated situation because he's had these issues in the past, I think the standards are a little higher for him to get back on the field.
Well, if you just look at Carr too, last week it was limited full. And so I don't know if because he was limited yesterday on Thursday, then I don't know. We'll see how he practices Friday later today.
Yeah, just a note on timing, depending on when you're listening to this. We post the injury reports on our YouTube community section, and so you'll be able to see. But as of this recording, we don't have Friday practice hasn't even happened yet, so we don't have an injury report, so we don't know. But it is interesting. It's like if you look at the two guys who, like Rashid Shaheed's doubtful, he's very unlikely to play. But if you look at the two guys who are sort of questionable, it's Olave and Cam Jordan. I think if you'd ask people like after the game Sunday, Rod, Cam Jordan much more likely to play in a week than Olave with the concussion. Now it almost feels the opposite. Cam Jordan hadn't practiced, so we don't think we'll probably see him.
Yeah, I remember seeing him. He was limping in the locker room after the game, but I do think Cam's a veteran guy. I mean, he's been in the league forever. I don't think he's a guy that necessarily has to practice. If you're just letting him rest up for the week and saving him for Sunday, I mean, I could see that case with him. So I don't know if I read too much into Cam's injury yet, but I mean, we'll find out today if they rule him out. But I mean, I think if he's questionable or doubtful or anything like that, I think Cam will probably play just because that's kind of who he's been.
Yeah, of course, different situations. One is maybe a pain tolerance and functionality issue versus Olave's got to be cleared by an independent doctor. So
right, and another thing we haven't mentioned is Marcus May and Pete Werner. They could not be up for this game as well. They haven't practiced all week with. I think they both have shoulder injuries. So looks like the Saints defense could be down. Cam Jordan doesn't play. At least 3 starters there, and then they already have Lattimore out.
Right. That's what I think. These injuries are starting to stack up into some critical guys. We know the Saints brought in Jason Pierre-Paul. He's already re-signed now, gone to Miami. So their depth at end is a little weak if they can't get Jordan on the field. And that's a big look. This is a tough game for a number of reasons, but one thing I think is a big factor, and we haven't really talked about it yet, but is that Dan Campbell coaches that team. Aaron Glenn's the defensive coordinator. Mark Brunell's on the staff. I mean, they've got a bunch of former Saints that know this personnel, know this scheme. I mean, they're going to know if Cam Jordan is out there, they're going to attack that side of the Saints defense. I mean, they have great respect for Cam Jordan, I'm sure. So I think that factor is important now with the personnel, the familiarity with the Saints personnel with this coaching staff. That's why I think this game's going to be doubly tough.
Yeah, it's a great point, and we will talk Saints defense here in a minute. I want to let you know that the holidays are here, and there's no better gift than a championship poster to commemorate a lot of titles the past few years in Louisiana. If you're a Saints fan, LSU fan, Tulane fan, individual posters and championship poster sets all available now. They will arrive in plenty of time before the holidays. Visit store.NOLA.com to look at your choices and use promo code INSIDER for 15% off your order. That's store.NOLA.com. So let's kind of go into our breakdown like we always do. We'll start with when the Saints have the ball. Obviously don't know about Olave. I personally think the Saints can still move the ball here, Rod. I know we talk about the red zone and what's got to be better. But the Lions' defense has really dropped off, particularly against the past few weeks. I mean, they made Jordan Love look like an all-pro on Thanksgiving.
They did, and I think if the Saints were at full strength at receiver, I'd probably feel a little bit more confident. But I just think with some of the guys they're having to try out there receiver that, even though that's the Lions' weakness, I don't know if the Saints have enough to actually attack it. I know they'll try to, and if they can, they'll be successful. But I just don't. I think with the injuries, I think it just kind of offsets, that weakness for the Lions.
Yeah, it was interesting when all those guys went out in Atlanta on Sunday, Matt. They did get pretty creative, and Lynn Bowden flashed a couple of big plays. They used Taysom Hill as a receiver more. I think Jawan Johnson would have been more involved if he had stayed in. They kind of played Bowden and Alvin Kamara off of each other and made one the decoy and the other. I mean, they were showing the ability to do some things. Now, with a full week, if they don't have Olave, will the Lions be ready for that? Will they have other wrinkles? I mean, that's what we don't know.
Yeah, I think the thing for me is how much is Derek Carr on the same page with some of these receivers he hasn't worked with in practice as much. I mean, you think about the A.T. Perry miscommunication in the Atlanta game where he thought he committed a false start and didn't even run the route, and it was this ugly throw out of the end zone. So, it does feel like an Alvin Kamara game where they get him involved. Maybe, if you have him in fantasy football and a PPR or something, you're happy with his production there. But I mean, those are the types of things that I think they're going to have to do. I think they're going to have to use Taysom Hill again a little bit more. But I do think they'll be able to move the ball, but I wouldn't be surprised if, they stall out in the red zone again and we see kind of these familiar issues, especially if Olave doesn't play.
Yeah, we've talked about that enough, Jeff, so let's address it.
Yeah, well, look, I think Rod's right. I mean, the injuries with no Mike Thomas and then looks like no Shaheed, you're looking at really some limited personnel at the receiver core. So I think it's going to have to be a big running back day, Taysom Hill day, and tight ends. I mean, they're going to have to manufacture yards and points with guys like that. I mean, I do think it's a big bonus that Alex Anzalone is not going to play. I mean, he's their best linebacker. He's their defensive captain. He's having a Pro Bowl season. He certainly knows the Saints very well. He's their best cover linebacker as well. So I think there's a chance to exploit the linebacker core without him in the lineup with the backs and the tight ends. So I think that could be very effective for them, considering maybe we see Jimmy Graham. Who knows?
I was listening to some Lions stuff this week, and they talked about that the absence of Alex Anzalone. I can't even say his name. But they drafted Jack Campbell out of Iowa in the first round this year for this very reason. So
he's been solid.
This is a chance that he can step up and be that guy. So we'll see if that works. But I mean, Alex, like Jeff said, he's had a really good year and part of that Saints draft class that was really good. So that's a big absence for the Lions.
Yeah, guy's a true sideline to sideline linebacker. You talk about Kamara. The Lions actually are number 5 in the NFL in rushing defense, 91.3 yards per game. But some of that is, look, Anzalone's missing, and then also they've been playing from ahead so much. This is not a team that's had to chase games, at least not until the past couple weeks. They were chasing, obviously, the Packers on Thanksgiving. They were chasing the Bears on the week before that. And so, look, I think a big thing is it sounds obvious to say, but the big thing, Jeff, is going to be the play of Derek Carr. Like, he's got to play better. He's got to play better, particularly in the red zone. You had a couple of stats about exactly how bad he's in. I think they've been circulating around elsewhere. But at some point, they just need the guy to make a play.
Yeah, it starts with the quarterback. And look, there's a united front out on Airline Drive right now, basically supporting Derek Carr and trying to deflect some of the criticism. But this is where it all starts. I mean, there's a reason they're paying him $35 million a year, right? No one else on the offense is close to that because you've got to get production out of that position. I mean, just look at that Falcons game. If he doesn't throw the pick six, the Saints are going to go up at least 6, likely go up 6-0, maybe 10-0. And that was such a devastating play, as Dennis Allen has alluded to, because now the Saints kind of take Atlanta out of their game, force them to maybe pass a little bit. They want to run the ball, and they're all of a sudden they're winning 7-3. So now they're in control of the game. And I've listened to Sean Payton so many times talk about getting control of a game as a play caller. And the Saints were on the verge of getting control of that game, and then it flipped right on them because of a bad play by the quarterback. So Carr's got to take care of the football, and he's got to start, I think, making some plays to boost the confidence of his teammates, frankly. I think that's important. They've got to believe in him. I know that they respect him. I know they like him, but they've also got to believe in him. And right now I think there's a little bit of a crisis in confidence that starts at the quarterback spot.
I have my weekly one-on-one chat with Derek that you can read every Thursday on NOLA.com. And this week while I was talking to him, we kind of do it in the hallway and people are walking by. And Ronald Curry walked by and stopped the interview, like stopped Derek mid-sentence to tell me, hey, you got to make sure you refer to this guy as DC Marvel. And I kind of laughed, and I thought, it's a DC Comics versus Marvel reference. But after hearing Carr's press conference that was so kind of testy and on edge just a few minutes before this interview happened, the way that they're talking about him in the building is so much different than the way we're talking about him out here. But at some point, the production does have to be there, or he is going to lose his teammates too.
No, absolutely. But you're still seeing that support. Dennis Allen said, we're not in the issue of blaming anyone this week. And yet, if you look at other press conferences that Dennis Allen has had, he just said, Cam Jordan has had to play better and needs more sacks. And like, there is, most coaches are going to protect their quarterback. I don't think that's unique to Dennis Allen. I think you can look at the NFL, God knows in Washington they've protected their quarterback a time or two after bad play, but he hasn't performed to the level that they've expected. And I think the thing that really stands out is these are issues. What makes it more frustrating is that these are issues that Derek Carr has had his whole career. I mean, this is not new. He was bad in the red zone in Oakland and Las Vegas, and it's really showing up here, and even worse.
Yeah, and he had these issues also with the Raiders, and that some teammates were. He's a polarizing quarterback, very much like Jameis Winston. I mean, you're either all in or against him, and this is carried over to New Orleans, the same issues. But I do think there's opportunity here. We've talked about it with Detroit. There's opportunity to move the ball. Obviously, the red zone emphasis this week. They talked about they moved up extra work on the red zone in practice this week to try and emphasize it. Sometimes I think you can overdo it, and I wonder when he gets down there, and it's going to happen on Sunday, how much is going to be in his head about what's going on, and can he overcome that?
And I think that's going to be one of the big keys for this game is I think Derek Carr needs something good to happen early in this game. Because if it doesn't, I mean, we've kind of been talking about this, but the fans are going to, the boos are going to start, and I think his confidence starts to go down. The team starts to doubt. They just need something good to happen early, and they can play from ahead and take control of the game like Jeff mentioned, and I think that's the key to winning this game.
Yeah, the very first time he misses an open receiver and checks down, the very first time, it doesn't even have to be a big mistake. The very first time that they get stopped on third down, the very first time a pass is slightly behind somebody, like the boos are going to come, and they're just going to build from there if it doesn't get better. So, all right, that's when the Saints have the ball. We'll flip things over. One more thing I did want to mention. The Lions' defense not great, but I do think a strong point for them can be that defensive line and that pass rush. Aiden Hutchinson's a big name, but they've got the Saints' offensive line's done a pretty good job. They need to continue that.
Yeah, no, Aiden Hutchinson has the potential to take a game over, and he's done it plenty of times, and that's kind of the matchup, whether he's against Pete or Ramczyk, depending on whether they move him around or not. But the tackles have to hold up in this game.
If you double, almost everybody that plays the Lions doubles him. It'll be interesting to see if the Saints allow Ramczyk to try and take him one-on-one. But if you take care of him, there's not a whole lot of other pass rush in that front. So I do think the Saints will certainly have a plan for him.
Okay, we'll flip things, and we talked about this a little bit already with the injury to Cam Jordan, and Dunk, you talked about the Lions knowing the Saints scheme. But when the Lions have the ball, I think it's got to start for the Saints with stopping the run. They haven't done it the last 3 weeks. They are 31st in the NFL over the past 3 games in yards rushing allowed. Only better than the Cardinals. I think it's like 165 yards they've allowed rushing the last 3 games. So it's just got to be better than that. I mean, especially if you're going to kind of force this Lions team to be one-dimensional.
Yeah, and I think it starts right up front with the defensive line. I mean, the Lions are built in the image of Dan Campbell. They're very physical. They have some maulers on that offensive line. I know Frank Ragnow was a guy the Saints really valued in the draft a few years back. They wanted to select him, and I think the Lions beat him to the punch. I remember talking to Sean Payton after the draft when Penny Sewell went, and he said, I think he's a Hall of Fame player. That's how much he thought of Penny Sewell. Now, he's started slowly in his career, but he's really come on lately. So they're going to have their hands full with that Lions front, and they have a 1-2 punch at running back, much like the Falcons. Gibbs has really come on, kind of their Bijan Robinson. So I think that's job one, and then you worry about getting after Goff. At least they don't have a mobile quarterback to have to do.
I was going to say the one bright spot is that Goff can be a statue back there, and that may help this pass rush that's struggled too.
Yeah, for the pass rush, I wonder how it's going to hold up if Cam Jordan doesn't play. Carl Granderson has maybe been their most consistent defensive lineman this year, but you look at Isaiah Foskey, he's off the injury report. This might be his first chance to get extended playing time if Cam Jordan doesn't go, but Payne Turner's still hurt. They lost Jason Pierre-Paul. Like, they elevated Jason Pierre-Paul last week, and he was playing ahead of guys like Kyle Phillips and some of the other backups. Like they wanted that veteran presence for a reason, and now he's gone. So, I think the Lions' offensive line is pretty strong, I think. And, I don't, even though Goff has a tendency to hold the ball, I don't necessarily think this is a cure-all for the Saints' sack problems.
And Saints spend their top 2 draft picks on defensive linemen, Brian Brzee and Isaiah Foskey. Be a great time for them to kind of show that they were worth those picks.
Yeah, I mean, this is that time when we knew eventually that these injuries. We talked all season about how the Saints have held up injury-wise, and now they're starting to get some. So, yeah, these guys are going to have to step up and play well for this team to have a chance.
How about in the secondary? Amon-Ra St. Brown having a great year. No Marshawn Lattimore. Falls on Paulson and Debo. But, the Lions got some depth there on the edge also.
Yeah, I thought Yadam played well last week. I think they held up in the secondary. We'll see what happens with Marcus May, if Howden has to step in there. But I think Amon-Ra St. Brown might be the best receiver that the Saints have faced this year. I mean, DJ Moore is probably up there as well. But that guy, even though he's a different type of player, I think he really fits that Lions kind of culture. He is physical. He can create separation. So even though the Lions do rely on their running backs the way that they do, I mean, St. Brown being such a threat, it gives them so much more versatility, and I actually think their tight ends are pretty good as well with Sam Laporta.
Yeah, Laporta's excellent. They got Jamison Williams back. There was a first-round pick, I think, a few years ago. So he's a deep threat. They're going to challenge the Saints, and I agree with Matt. I mean, I think St. Brown's outstanding. He's, in my opinion, by far the best receiver they've faced this year. I mean,
I'm not even sure who else would be.
Yeah, DJ Moore or
Nico Collins.
Tank Dell's having a great year.
Right.
But,
But no, I mean, there'll be a big
Ridley.
challenge. But Goff, the thing about Goff is he's a veteran guy. He'll get them in the right. He's a lot like Carr. He'll get him in the right play. He'll be able to recognize, I think, pressure packages, things like that. But you can get after him. I mean, he's not very mobile. So this is a big game. I think you made a great point about Foskey. I mean, we haven't seen really much of him this year. But also Brzee. Brzee has really kind of tailed off lately. Really not made a lot of plays. The whole interior, the Saints' interior defensive front did not play well against the Falcons. And they need to get more out of that group. And this game's going to be difficult because they're really strong along the defensive interior.
Yeah.
Offensive interior, I'm sorry.
And Jared Goff has caught a bit of the turnover bug lately. So maybe if you can do that, you could force some game-changing mistakes, which is what the Saints need. So watching the Saints Insider Podcast is brought to you by Bank Plus. Encourage you to subscribe to the channel. Hit the like button for us. If you're listening on the podcast platform, a 5-star review is always appreciated. Quick note on special teams before we get into keys to the game and predictions. Blake Grupe, they brought in some kickers. He was kind of limited at practice. Any actual real concern he won't be going Sunday?
No. We asked Darren Rizzi how he's progressing, and he gave an update on how he's progressing this season is his performance, and had to quickly clarify, I know we meant the injury, but said that they added Austin Saber to the practice squad only for insurance purposes. Shouldn't really be a problem, and he expects him to go. So
They'd really like to limit his workload as far as not attempting 6 field goals.
right.
Yeah, if he's doing 6 field goals, this game won't be pretty.
No.
So,
No.
Yeah, I talked to him, and he told me it's something he's just going to have to manage the rest of the year. He thinks he'll be fine.
Yeah. And I mean, if you think logically about a kicker, it's 1 second that you've got to kind of concentrate if you can get over that pain and still execute what you need to do. It's not like another player where you're out there play after play after play. So, okay, that's special teams. Let's move quickly into keys to the game, and we've mentioned some of them. Rod, I think you alluded to it earlier and hit it on the head. Like, a big thing here is that the Saints they got to have a really good first quarter, because I think the Superdome crowd is just waiting to turn on them, quite frankly, and up to the point where home field advantage becomes a disadvantage if things go poorly.
yeah, this team hasn't scored a touchdown on this opening drive the entire season. And they don't have to score a touchdown. They need to score a point. And just at least move the ball. Don't go 3 and out, because if they go 3 and out, I think it's going to get bad. So for me, that is the biggest key for the game. I just think they have to get off to a good start. They can't fall behind and get that crowd on the other side. And I know that sounds crazy that we're talking about the Saints fans turning on them, but that's where we are right now in the season.
Yeah, no doubt about it. Guys, what do you have keys to the game?
Well, yeah, just to build on that, I mean, you look at the Falcons game, they had their most yardage in the first quarter all year. I mean, they had 163 yards. They just couldn't convert. So, Derek Carr, I think, has to score. That's obvious. But I think getting some early touchdowns, converting in the red zone, even all these simple things, just to kind of take the pressure off him and kind of give some people some confidence. I mean, even if they lose, I think I think people would look at it and say, all right, it's the Lions. It's just a matter of how well Derek Carr plays. I know this isn't a market for a sympathy loss or anything like that, but it's kind of reaching that point.
Yeah, I mean, like the Jaguars game was a good example. Like a good team, and they battled back, and you came away from that game feeling better than you did this Falcons game. But here's a key: don't throw a pick six early in the game.
Sure,
because if he does.
Well, it's like you mentioned, they had 163 yards of offense, and they were losing the game. Like you can't not cash in that yardage.
Right, but the good thing is I don't think Detroit's got a Jesse Bates. I mean, that guy's outstanding. He's going to be in the Pro Bowl, he's maybe All-Pro this year. But I do think establishing the run, we talk about this a lot, getting Kamara, Taysom Hill, Jamal Williams involved, and taking some of the pressure off of Carr to where he doesn't have to do everything, using the jet sweeps like they did against Atlanta. I think those things will help him kind of settle in and get a rhythm offensively if they can. And they've got to have some good things happen to him early. I wouldn't be surprised if they tried something, like we haven't seen really trickery out of them lately offensively, or maybe they fake something, just something to get the crowd in it and get some momentum for this team and get some confidence.
Jamal Williams revenge game. We haven't talked about that angle.
I like that
very much.
As a pass blocker and chipper for Aiden Hutchinson.
That's his role.
No, but I mean, I think you're right. Like, I think you could see like a reverse or a flea flicker or some crazy thing that they normally wouldn't try, just to try to get the energy in the building and with the team. Anyway, it's not like just looking at the standings again. You can lose this game and still be okay because you've got a couple of easy games coming up. You've got the rematches with the Bucs and the Falcons at the end of the year. Like, it's not season over if you lose, Matt, as you said, but you've got to have some kind of momentum coming out of this thing.
Yeah, I mean, and it puts on the pressure of, it would be a disaster code red if they lose to Carolina next week and even the Giants. But it is just, it's not a get-right game because the opponent is much better than a get-right type of team, but you just need something to build on, and you just need to kind of fix some of the problems that have occurred, and I don't know.
And look, I'd like to see some energy and enthusiasm. I'm going to be really curious to see the body language, some of the energy from the team, because I didn't see that. We talked about it on the pod, but I didn't see that in the Falcons game. I think fans were upset about that too. You could see it from the Falcons, didn't see it from the Saints, and they've got to have that. They're going to have to match the intensity because the Lions got embarrassed at home on Thanksgiving Day. And, I mean, we all saw that press conference with Dan Campbell. We're biting kneecaps. I mean, they're going to come in fired up.
And on long rest, too. They played on Thursday.
Salty. Yeah. They are going to have their A game. Saints got to match it.
It also just feels like the Saints are maybe a little tight. We talked about Derek Carr's reaction in the press conference, but there was this moment in the locker room this week where Jonathan Abram kind of like walked past everyone to reporters and was joking. He was joking, but he said, like, you guys got to smile more. We're not going to let you in here if you don't smile. And so even though he was joking, I think it kind of reflects maybe the frustration that the Saints themselves are feeling in terms of just like, hey, let's be in a better mood because that's gonna get us out of this. And
Carr said that too.
Yeah,
didn't Carr say something like that?
They're working very hard to stay positive. But then Colin Saunders had a sign in front of his locker that said, like, I'm attending business. I'm on business. I can't talk right now. I mean, so I think part of that is they're trying, but they feel the tension. Yeah.
They feel the tension for sure. And going back to what Jeff said about the intensity, I mean, this defense used to have so much swagger. I mean, they would, they'd make a big tackle. Everybody's, they got all the different handshakes going on. You really don't see any of that stuff anymore.
No rallying to each other.
Yeah,
you don't see the body language like you want to see.
Yeah, so we'll see. Okay, prediction time. We'll see if it all comes together for the Saints because it will be code red. I think if you better beat Carolina and the Giants in the last 2 games of this homestand if you don't pull this one off. So let's see what we think. Luke Johnson's not here, but he sent in his prediction. He had a relatively close game, but the Lions winning at 28-23. Sounds like 3 field goals to me. Three Blake Grupe field goals, and they can't quite get it done. Rod, what do you have?
I'm one of the ones who I think it's going to be bad Sunday. I just don't know if they have the answer, and I don't think they're going to figure it out this week. I think the Lions are going to come in here really hungry to bounce back after their loss. I just think they have more talent. The Saints' injuries, I think, are just going to kind of catch up with them this week. And so I had 31-17, I think.
You have 31-16, which would be 3 field goals as well. So.
Yeah. I had it 31-13 at first, and I said, let's let him kick another one.
All right. I thought a lot about this, and I think the Saints and Lions are closer to each other talent-wise than most people are willing to admit at this point because of the way the results have gone, which is fine and fair. But this is the NFL, and in the NFL, nothing is ever as it seems, at least not for long. And so I predicted a close game from the beginning, and I actually flipped my prediction this morning, and I'm going to be the one to say it and say the Saints get it done. 27-26. I'll even go as far to say this. Dan Campbell decides to bite some kneecaps and go for 2 in the closing minutes of the game after a touchdown, and the Saints stop it and win the game 27-26.
Wow, that's something. I do think a streak is going to end. I think Derek Carr's touchdownless streak at 2 games is going to end, but as for their losing streak, I expect that to continue. I've got the Lions 27-19, which I realized after I submitted it was the same score as the Minnesota game, but whatever.
Could happen. This team has been known to repeat it. Jeff, I noticed a minute ago your mic flag is upside down. It's like a Saints distress call.
Yes, it is. You're right. That's maybe fitting, right? Well, like I kind of feel like I wimped out on my pick this week. I should have gone with Rod's route of because I do think that they could easily get blown out in this game. It's circumstances. All the intangibles that you and I talked about earlier this year on some of these games, the circumstances all go against the Saints in this one. I think Detroit, having lost the way they did, having that extra time, I think Ben Johnson's going to come in with a really creative game plan. He's an excellent offensive coordinator. He'll be a head coach probably next year. They know the Saints personnel, some of their weaknesses. I think they're going to attack. I expect Detroit to have one of the best game plans that the Saints have seen. Because that coaching staff I have a lot of respect for. So I don't see it happening for Saints.
Certainly could happen. I fully expect to be. Oh, yeah,
27-23 Detroit, but I'm starting to regret not making it close.
Yeah, it could get ugly. I fully expect to be mocked on Wednesday's show, maybe even in our Saints Insider postgame show for picking the Saints. But hey, somebody had to do it. I'll step up and see if the Saints can get the job done. And really a game that might kind of turn the season around late here. So we will see you after the game for the Saints Insider postgame show. That's about 30 minutes after final whistle on this same Saints on NOLA.com YouTube channel. And then we'll be back Wednesday for a full show. Invite you to subscribe, like, share the channel. All of those things are appreciated. No, it's a tough time for the Saints, but we appreciate you following along. For Rod Walker, Matthew Paris, and Jeff Duncan, Norman Bell and Robert Young, our producers. And we will see you next time on the Saints Insider.